Welcome, everybody. Here we are in the Conscious Sexuality and Relationship Online Conference. I'm Mark David.
And I'm Emily Rosen.
And we are here with the very wonderful and enlightening Ms. Kamala Devi. Welcome. Glad you're here.
Thank you, Mark and Emily. It's great to see you too.
Yay. So I'm going to say a few words about you and what you're about for viewers and listeners so they can get caught up right away. So Kamala Devi is a nationally recognized speaker, author, mentor, and polyamory activist who created the Beyond Monogamy program to help open-minded people liberate their love lives. She's been successfully navigating open relationships for over 15 years, in an open marriage for 10 years, and is the mother of a beautiful 6-year-old boy. So, and I know you've been at this and you've been a thought leader, and personally, I consider you somebody who's brave or either just really natural with this, maybe a combination of both. So I'm thrilled that you're here.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I think it'd be just great for viewers and listeners to learn a little bit more about personally what led you to get into this in the first place and inspired to teach about it.
Thank you. Well, it's an honor to share. I always feel like, there's part of me that is like wanting to shout from the mountaintops. There's other ways of doing love, and I want to tell the world. And then there's this other part of me, because it's so vulnerable and personal, that feels a little bit like, ooh, it's so private. And so when people ask what my personal journey is, I kind of have a story of how, as a bisexual woman, when I realized that my sex didn't fit into the little box, I had to question everything. I had to question sexuality. I had to question monogamy. And so we're talking about a 15-year-old girl who realized, whoa, my sexuality doesn't look like that. So in pretty short order, as soon as I came into being a sexual, my quinceañera, I'm Latina, and so I was coming of age, and I started not just exploring, bisexuality, but kink and polyamory and tantra. And so for me, there's many different paths and communities, and my practice is personally very eclectic. Now I need to say that personally, because your sexuality is completely unique and probably different. And even though I'm a role model, and so many couples come to me asking for coaching and advice, and I can share with them some really deep insights from the edge. In no way do I know what's right for you, or am I trying to say that there's one way to do love and sex.
Mm-hmm. Well put. Thank you. So why don't we dive in? There's this thing called polyamory, which is getting a lot more attention these days, and it seems like it's gathering momentum. What is it? How do you define it? And how does it relate to this thing called conscious sexuality?
Excellent. So the most basic definition of polyamory is being open to multiple lovers who are fully informed and in consent. So it's totally honest. It's the opposite of cheating, if you would. And that to make polyamory work, it involves a lot of communication, and oftentimes, some of the people who are practicing polyamory don't even have multiple sexual partners, because poly means many, amory means love. And so you can be polyamorous and have lots of loves and still be sexually, selective, or even just with one person. Mm-hmm. So you can be kind of polysensual. And I wanted to say that up front because I don't want it to be confused with like polysluttery or just being promiscuous. And the reason it's getting so much attention right now is because marriage is failing in such a broad, big way. And not to say that marriage isn't a beautiful institution for people who are deeply committed and deeply satisfied in that choice, but it's no longer just the default choice. So where it used to be that, everybody grows up, has this idea of, falling in love, having, getting married, and then having kids. And, like there was kind of like this track that was the default. And we're seeing 50% marriages fail. And then we're seeing a lot of people who are still married that aren't happy, or they are cheating. Consciousness starts to invent, hey, what are the other options? So this is where the conscious sexuality comes in, because it's like, am I going to go with the default and do what I'm being told all the time, or just, do what's expected of me, or what Hollywood, Disney, or Hallmark tell me I should do for love? Or am I going to consciously create my own, love life? And so conscious sexuality, I believe, is about recognizing that our sexual energy is our life force energy, and saying, what is the most alive expression of who I am? And that doesn't have to look like what everybody else in society is doing.
Was that a big leap for you? Did it just feel natural? Because I keep thinking to myself, wow, that is so against the grain of what we're told and what we're taught. And I'm just imagining your parents going, huh. So how did you navigate it? Was it challenging?
Sure,
it's challenging?
It's funny, Mark. You brought up, what my parents' reaction. If you ask my mom, I just spent Sunday with her. I took her and my son out for a walk in the harbor, and she always makes comments like, "You're so selfish. You're such a hog. Most women can't find one date on a Friday night, and you have 3 boyfriends." So yes, it's very much out of the box, and it is very shocking. And it's very. I don't do it for the shock value, or like my mom suggests, because I'm so greedy. For me, it's a natural expression. After 15 years of building deep bonded relationships with people, instead of breaking up and not seeing that person as somebody who's monogamous, they have a connection and then it doesn't work and they break up and they look for the next person, because there's this thing called serial monogamy. I'm pretty much still in love and in contact with everybody that I've ever loved. And the question is, was that a hard, huge stretch for me? Well, it'd be a really hard stretch for me to try to just be with one person, especially if it was till death do you part. That wouldn't honor how, on a conscious sexual path, I'm constantly evolving and growing and making deep connections. And to cut myself off from that would be much harder than to learn the communication skills and the processing skills and the scheduling skills that are necessary to make it work. So it definitely is, if someone's just hearing about polyamory for the first time and they're curious, like, wow, I'd like to have two boyfriends or 2 girlfriends, or it's not something that you can do alone. You have to do it within community, support, a lot of communication. But as you mentioned, Mark, it's getting a lot more visibility, and the conversation's opening up, so people have a lot more resources on how to do it well.
Yeah, I think you brought up 2 things that really stuck with me. One is, the piece around cheating. And I think we were interviewing Ariel Ford, and she was saying the statistics, and they're stunning. It's on the steady rise. So a lot of people, even though they're in a monogamous relationship, are acting outside that relationship in some way, shape, or form. Do you feel like in those instances, like bringing this kind of conscious conversation to the table can shift that paradigm in terms of how a lot of people have that fear that comes up when they're in a long-term monogamous relationship, and then do things kind of behind the scenes because they're afraid of the consequences of having an authentic conversation?
Yeah, I've met people come to me after like a lifetime of cheating, and they're like, oh my gosh, my whole life felt like I I wasn't satisfied with one relationship, and they have all the shame and the guilt of having hurt and cheated on someone before. And then when they saw our show, by the way, my family and myself were in a Showtime series called Polyamory, Married, and Dating. And when that hit the airwaves, we had 2 seasons, we had tons of people coming out of the woodwork saying, wow, I didn't know this was possible. I've had 2 boyfriends or girlfriends, and we thought we were alone in it or had to cheat to do it. And now we recognize that this is actually this is my nature. And I want to know how to do it in a way that's ethical and doesn't hurt people. So it is a game changer. When monogamy is the default and taught, then cheating is your only option. If you have attractions to multiple, if you allow yourself natural attractions to other people. And I really feel like the vast majority of people have the capacity to be not just attracted, but in love with multiple people simultaneously. Not everybody. I do also think there's some people who are naturally monogamous and are happiest in monogamy, structures. But I also think not everybody who is attractive and falls in love with people have the ethics and the consciousness to maintain a healthy, open, polyamorous relationship. And I want to make that distinction, Mark, because I know that you're fostering a lot of consciousness, and people are waking up and they want to make their love life their spiritual choice and practice. And I don't believe there's such a thing as spirituality or consciousness without ethics. Frankly, if you're not telling the truth, in love, in sex, then, you're creating more delusion, and that illusion's, it's regressive and de-evolutionary. Like the smallest amount of cheating or the guilt that you feel or the hiding that you do, it can really set you back on your path of waking up and being more conscious.
So I'm wanting to ask you, this is kind of a personal question, but here you are, you did this series for a couple of seasons where you kind of opened up your world to be viewed. How was that for you, and how is that for you in retrospect?
It was an adventure. It's really been fun. Like I said, to open the conversation. When I first started this series and I said I was polyamorous, people said polyester, what's poly? What is that? And I mean, it was very confusing. After just 1 season, it became a household term. People knew what it was because we got to demonstrate it. And then in the second season, it's I think a cultural game changer. We had the very first show of its kind, and there's been a lot of media opening up since, which is a blessing. But a lot of what I did wasn't for me personally. It's like a transpersonal act. It's like, I want to give this to the world. I want to serve. What it did for me personally, it gave me that witness consciousness to see myself outside of myself, to see how it was a reality check too. I'm surrounded in Southern California by all these free love hippies like myself who are radicals, or even in my Tantra community who are super supportive and open-minded. But then I got a real taste of what's going on in the rest of America. And I realized, wow, because of the hate mail and because of the intense reaction, it was a wake-up call for me. And it just made me realize there's so much more work to do to help people, really be empowered or really be liberated, and so they can have more choice and give other people more choice about their love life.
I'm curious, did you engage any of those people? Did you feel a need to kind of respond when you got, attacks or hate mail?
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing, this conversation of hate mail, because at the high level, like the higher part of me is like, oh, these people are suffering and they're in judgment of me because they're in their own shadow, and I just want to pray for them and bless them. And then the low part of me is like, how dare you? And like, I want to say, like, and there's a couple irresistible emails that I couldn't, especially when the Bible thumping was really thick. There's some notes, especially since the Bible is through and through wrought with multiple, it's more polygamy, but multiple relationships where there's less monogamy in the Bible times than there is multiple relationships. But that's a whole side note. The response to the hate mail is we have more work to do. It's just, I want to educate people. And it's not like I want to educate people because it's my right and I want them to accept me. It's because I want to give people the gift of choosing their own sexuality and making their love life their own. Mm-hmm. Like, I just think it's sad that people would be so scared and constrained when they really have a natural impulse. And this isn't just about polyamory.
Right.
This is, if you're kinky, if you're gay, if you're, like you have a deep sacred sexual expression that doesn't at all look like the porn that we get, shown to us both in commercials as well as on the internet. It's like important for people to say, like, who am I sexually? Who am I? What's the shape of my heart? And then how can I nurture that and be that in the world?
I just want to say something, we actually see that a lot in the food world even, right? So people who are paleo versus raw food vegan. I have a friend who came out as no longer being vegan and got death threats and hate mail, and so how people can get so dogmatic in their approaches. It's really fascinating how it unfolds.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you highlighted how the hate mail is not really on a higher level about polyamory per se or you. It's about anything really that we have shadow that we've kind of pushed aside. And I imagine that must be the collective fear or sort of symbolic of it for anyone. Wow, well, if I told my partner that this is how I feel, that I want this or want that or prefer this, even if it's in the confines of your own relationship, it feels like there's this free-floating fear that if I was my true sexual expression, I'm going to get hated, crucified, something bad's going to happen to me.
I think it's the core of the human psyche. Mm-hmm. Like, we all want to be loved, and deep in our hardwired into our neuropsychology is belonging to a tribe. Like, our survival absolutely depends on it. So to be able to say, like, when culture looks like it's saying this is how you have to be, and to be able to have the strength and the fortification to say, that doesn't work for me, this is who I am, requires a degree of security, not just in oneself, but also in your bonds, to say, hey, I've got friends who love me unconditionally, and they love me for who I am. And if my sexuality is a little different, or the way my diet's going to be different, I need to know that I'm going to still be a part of the tribe, that I'm still going to survive. And I think you hit the nail on the head. It's like, the real fear is, what if I'm in a relationship? So now I'm deeply in love and somewhat dependent. We become dependent. I mean, I'd love to think we were all, interdependent, but the truth is that we bond so deeply when we fall in love, and then to think, wow, if my sexual energy is not fulfilled here, I want to have something else. Will my partner come with me? Will they do that with me, or am I going to get cut off? That's terrifying. And the deep teaching in this is, at the simplest level, we know consciously be yourself, and people will, be attracted to who you really are. But the deeper teaching is around how anything else is a betrayal, not just to yourself, but, to your beloved. That if you're not speaking your true sexual expression, you're likely underestimating them. You're likely you're deceiving them in a way, like you're depriving them of true love and satisfaction as well, because they're now in a relationship with a lie. Mm-hmm. And that's not what love's about. Love's about, hey, I want you to be fully expressed and happy and in truth. And so if I withhold from you what my real sexual energy is or what my desires are, then I'm basically withholding you from the opportunity to be really in truth and in love. Mm. So it's a really deep dilemma. It cuts to our survival needs.
Yeah.
But it's also a really high dilemma, and it's the only path to sexual and spiritual enlightenment is telling the truth.
And it feels like, and thanks for saying that, it's almost impossible, maybe it is impossible to be in this conversation at this level about sexuality without this higher container for it, without a spiritual context, because it seems like it keeps pointing us there, really.
Well, thank you for saying that, because I think that's my nature. And I like to think sexuality is like this piano with all 88 keys. You know, there's this huge range. And some people like to play like da 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 da, like in the deep, like not just the bondage and the darkness and the kink and the, you know, and it's like it's about the body and the hedonism. And that's awesome. And then there's people, and you probably know a lot of them on these teleseminars, where it's like, dee, 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 dee. I'm playing with the higher octaves, the spiritual realms, and the upper chakras. And that's awesome. And that's really deeply satisfying to some people. That's like where the juice is. And for me, like as a tantrika, I love to be fully alive and to embrace the full spectrum and to say, like, let's make music at all these levels. And part of being open, being, you know, in polyamorous relationship, you know, truly with about 12 lovers, I like to meet some people in this place, meet some people in this place, and some, like my beloved partner, Michael, of 12 years, we traverse the entire scale together. And so I don't have a lot of judgment around, oh, if you're going to play down here, you have to balance yourself up here, or that the only way to do this is consciously, because trust me, in the early stages of exploration and figuring it out, some people are only capable of this. What I do advocate is not just permission for people to know who they are and to act in alignment with that, but I advocate wherever you find yourself, if it's over here, to stretch a little bit and to play with a little more than to play outside the box. And then if you're way up here all the time, why don't you just delve deeper into those lower chakras and see what more embodied pleasure feels like.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
So here you are, you know, in this amazing universe of sexuality and expression, and you're a mama, and you're raising a 6-year-old, and I'm gonna guess, I would bet my money that it's a pretty effortless and clear process for you. But I'm wondering kind of how you navigate that, because you're a mother.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, he wouldn't be here if it weren't for sex, right?
Good point.
So the effortless clear thing is that the animal in us, like anybody can have a child. Like that's what animals do. We reproduce, right? And then there's the whole question of how conscious is the parenting. And I think my metaphor could cross-apply to, you know, basically all relationships. What's important, because this particular area, being a parent and being a sex educator, is the topic on which I probably get the most hate mail. It's the place where it confronts people like so deeply. Oh, my family values and your sexual libertineness are in conflict, and so you're wrong. And I do get, you know, I have to tattletale on myself. I get a little bit defensive on this area. So I want to disclaim that the real key, you know, I want to do it with balance and consciousness, but the key is always sharing with my son developmentally appropriately. Mm-hmm. So as a sex educator, and he's by the way now 7 years old, I'm not going to whip out the banana and the condom and teach him how to do that. You know, it's like, no, I'm going to wait until he asks me, you know, and I'm going to really see what his readiness, what's his natural curiosity. There are not there are topics on which I might say to him, honey, when you are, that's sexual activities for adults, and when you're coming into your adulthood, we can have that conversation, or I'll give you details then. But I do tell him, if you have any questions about sex, of course he knows about the natural birds and bees and watches and I love watching it with him, by the way, Nat Geo and all of the animal and their wild reproductions. He watches that with great fascination, like a little scientist would. But his curiosity about human sexuality, I just want to address his natural development, not not expose him to anything that would sort of blossom him prematurely. So I think of children sort of like these plants or this flower that's blossoming naturally, and I want to be gentle, not to pry his petals open in any way, even if that's just mental curiosity.
Mm-hmm. Which is just, you've simply described to me good parenting across the board about anything, really.
Yeah, so I know you work with people, and I'm just curious, what makes the way you work with people around sex and relationship different than other sex and relationship coaching that's out there?
Yeah. So, you know what? Sex and relationship coaching as a field is it's a fairly new field, and because of that, there's some radical practices, and there's some more traditional, based in psychology practices. Really, where I place myself in all things, probably out at the radical edge. But what's important is when people come to me, what's their readiness? I'm very discerning about who I take as a client. Because I'm looking for someone who wants radical transformation. They're really ready to have a breakthrough in love and sex, and their breakthrough doesn't have to look like what they think it's going to look like. Mm-hmm. So that I kind of have to screen people for that. But the answer to your question, okay, well, what does coaching with Kamala Devi look like? Has so much to do with what are they wanting and ready for. So if I get a couple, for example, and they've been married 26 years and the spark has lost, and which is very typical in long-term monogamy, they hire me because they're like, oh, I want it to be like the honeymoon. And what I might do is really deeply look at, on that piano, what are their old standard songs they're playing, and where might we learn some new numbers, and where might we go back to or kind of delve deeper into some of their more formative experiences. So I don't want to get too abstract, except for saying that with a couple, it's a beautiful gift as a coach to have the opportunity to witness their intimacy. So often we get polarized in our intimacy, and it's very secluded, oh my God, that's something we do very privately. Yeah. So if you as a couple have an opportunity to have a high-level witness, a coach who has a lot of experience, see you in your making out, your love making, and be able to watch you, even if they gave no coaching tips and tools and practices, which I'm very versed in, but even if the only gift I had was, let me just behold you and take you in. And in being watched, what often happens is there's a self-awareness that comes in and kind of, it's like a spiritual adjustment. It's just a correction in how you see yourself. And so often the problems in our sex life are because we have outdated versions of how we saw ourselves, or our partner has an outdated version of who we are, that being witnessed currently, real time, can just, kind of dissolve those veils of past pain. It's like karma burns off, and you show up new and alive to your lover.
Mm-hmm. What you're saying on the one hand is such a radical concept for the average person. But then on the other hand, if you think about it, it makes perfect sense across the board, because anytime we're reaching out for help in any realm whatsoever, or we're learning anything, we're getting witnessed. If you're helping me be a better artist, you're witnessing me. A better musician, you're witnessing me. A better anything, we get witnessed by someone who says, okay, let's talk, Yeah. So it makes sense.
It's like self-awareness is just the first key. It's like, oh, I'm aware now. And sometimes it takes somebody else being aware of us for us to be aware of ourselves. But with awareness comes choice. Like, oh, now I know what I'm doing. Do I want to keep choosing that? And then with choice comes tremendous empowerment, and ultimately liberation, because you can free yourself from something that was unconsciously running you before you had the consciousness about what you were doing.
So when you put on your futuristic thinking cap, or when you just make your wish for the world, what do you wish for in terms of our sexuality and where things can go?
Yeah. I'm glad you asked. I'm really touched when I think about how people are waking up right now. Like, there's a tremendous readiness, and it's funny. There's a billion wicked thoughts is reporting on how widely porn is being viewed, and how accessible sex is because of the internet and but I think everybody gets that there's something more, and that sexuality is this, it's a doorway really to something more. And the part that touches me is that people are ready for that. They don't know what the doorway goes to. They're like, okay, we've come to the threshold, and it's scary whenever we come to the unknown. And I'm also really touched by the privilege that I have living in California, where there's hot tub tantra, and I have everything accessible. But on the other side of the planet, I've got sisters who are in full head to toe burqas, and there are such deep sexually repressed cultures that people could absolutely be stoned or literally crucified for the kind of life that I'm living. I get on national TV, I facilitated a 3-way marriage, and that's enough for, in most states of this nation, for people to be arrested for bigamy laws. And so, as incredibly empowered and excited I am for the awakening that we have, I'm equally eager for people to start embracing, welcoming that conversation, into those dark pockets of places, because I don't think we can really go through that doorway into the next level, what's possible in sexuality, until we start to really connect with, it is a global thing, like the readiness. So I guess to say like here in my, my poly and my tantric paradise, I'm surrounded by sexually liberated people. But as I connect with your viewers, and I start to feel into, like, everybody has just a little place where they can expand their repertoire. And I want that, okay, I'm not just playing this song, but I'm starting to expand it. But that expansion is also, I can accept a little bit more what other people are doing. I can notice, here's where my judgments are. In fact, quick metaphor, Mark, is in college I went to an art exhibit in a room with, on one end, like really innocent kissing pictures, and on the other end of the room, it's a full room, you walk around with art displayed, there was like deep pornography and wild, somewhat obscene pictures, and they were progressive, and the art installation gave you a piece of chalk when you walked in, black walls, and it's like, where do you draw the line? Where's the line where you say that's acceptable, that's not? And so what I want for the world is that as we give each other more permission to ethically, without harming anybody, but to ethically expand our sexuality, that we're giving ourselves permission to explore a little bit outside of our box, to do both. It's like, I want to explore a little, and I want to give you permission to do the same.
Beautifully put. Mm-hmm. That feels like a nice kind of prayer and affirmation to wrap up with. What do you think?
No, I agree. And I love that it's not about a specific way of being. It's about accepting what others choose for themselves and giving more allowance to oneself, because I think a lot of people don't even know what they desire because they have these artificial constraints on their own imagination and desires. So I love that wish for the world.
And Kamala Devi, I also love how, we really started this conversation anchored in the topic of polyamory, but it's so much bigger. I feel like you've kind of walked us through the doorway of it and said, well, hey, it's actually different than you might have thought. And we really appreciate you for that, because it's so much bigger than I think what our little minds can make up about it. So again, thank you for being such a great leader and spokesperson in this realm.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it'd be great if you could let listeners and viewers know how to follow up with you, where they can learn more about what you're up to.
Absolutely. I thought it was important to talk about more than polyamory, because I'm the poster child for polyamory, but that's actually not what I'm about. Like, people think that. What I'm about is liberating love. Yeah. And so my course, Beyond Monogamy, which I'd love to invite, your viewers to take, since it's a virtual course, that is about all kinds of love styles. It's not about, being poly or being a swinger or being tantric. It's about unconditional love. Mm-hmm. And that course, so that's a 6-series teleseminar, and you can get access to that either at beyondmonogamy.com or my website, which offers a really rich, weekly blog and all kinds of resources. In fact, I have 10 tips of sizzling sex. I want you to go on to kamaladevi.com and watch my little 10-tip video. So that's a little freebie for you right away. And that way we can stay in touch. Yeah, log on and give me your email, and we can just, I can send you invitations to all kinds of events that I do through the year, both online and like hotel takeovers, like Polypalooza. So that's one more, polypalooza.com. So that'll be fun. I look forward to meeting and hearing from your listeners. This has been great.
Thank you so much. And I want to make sure I have the spelling right for at least one of those, KAMALADEVI.com.
That's right.
Beautiful.
That's perfect. Thank you.
So, Kamala Devi, thank you so much. Much appreciated. This has been Mark David.
Emily Rosen.
On behalf of the Conscious Sexuality and Relationship Online Conference. Lots more to come, my friends. Take care.